Good morning. You're listening to WAPN 91.5 FM and WAPB 91.7 FM. And I'm super excited. I got a friend that we have been friends for a long time, but we don't want to say how long because then you know how old we are.
That's exactly right. Every time we walk into the room together, the Jurassic Park theme starts playing, so we don't talk about our age, not on the air.
But I am at the best age. I really am. I am
Yeah,
at
you
the
are.
best age because I have some wrinkles, I have some stripes, but you know what? I've lived life. And that's what we're kind of talking about, that we need to relive life, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think,
Well, first tell us who you are. I know who you are, but nobody else might not know. They know the voice.
hello there, WAPN family. This is Wiley Lowe, back with you for another occasion. And thank you, Shelley, for letting me join you for just a little bit today.
I'm excited. And what are we going to discuss today? I know it's either something either crazy or something close to my heart.
It's a little of both.
I think so too.
Today, I just want to visit with everybody to talk about a subject that everybody goes through, but sometimes it isn't always easy to talk about, and that is grief and loss. Mm-hmm. And there are so many folks out there, particularly, and you and I have this conversation 100 times. In the religious world, there are so many people who mean well to help us when we're suffering, when we're going through tough times, but so often the cliches and the catchphrases that they use can do more harm than good. Mm-hmm. So for all of you out there today, maybe you know somebody who's gone through a time of loss. Maybe you're going through it now. Maybe you're starting the process of grieving. Or maybe that loss happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you feel like, it's just old news. No, it's not. It's all important. It's all relevant. And what you're going through is real.
And, when they say that year thing, that in a year you'll feel better or whatever, anything can trigger the grief, can't it?
Well, that assumes that all loss is equal.
I know.
Shelley, there are things that are involved in complicated grief. Mm-hmm. Something has caused the grief to stagnate right where it is, and people have a hard time moving past it. And then they think something's wrong with them. And the reality is they're going through something real. It's like saying that any illness you should be able to get over in a week or 2 weeks or 5 weeks or a year. And we all know that illness is very much subject to the individual and what they're specifically going through. Mm-hmm. So if you've gone through a time of loss and grief, don't let anyone tell you how long you're supposed to grieve. Mm-hmm. Because I know they want to help and maybe they're ready to be better, but you may not be.
I love that. They want to help. Isn't that they do think they're helping? Guess what I've learned to do to help? You'll never guess. Grief groceries.
What?
Grief groceries.
So do you take groceries to people if they're grieving?
Uh-huh.
But see,
or have them delivered. And the reason why is you don't know what to do. You just don't know how to help them. You don't know what meal to get delivered because they're really not eating. Ice cream might be the food of the day. You don't know. And you don't really, and they'll say, oh, I'm fine. I don't need anything. I don't need you to bring me food. So you bring grief groceries. And that gives them an opportunity. And what you do is you get some frozen foods that are easy to cook or some microwave things, and then some junk food. And they're called grief groceries. And it's a new thing I'm doing.
And I think that is incredibly wise because you said something that I think is powerful. You said, I don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. And that is because with an individual, the loss is so specific, there aren't really words. There is something in ministry, and you'll appreciate this. This took me a long time. This took me 30 years to understand this, and that is the ministry of presence. Mm-hmm. As a younger minister, I wanted to say the right things. I wanted to do the right things. Mm-hmm. And over again in my ministry, I had people say, you made such a big difference, or this was important to me, or you helped in this way. And I'm like, when did I do any of that?
I can tell you when.
And it's just by being there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you have amazing talent. You might not realize that you have a talent, but the talent you have is, I have been to several funerals that you have done, and I feel like I knew the person better after you got up there because you make it a story of their life. And so that brings each and every one of us sitting there. We'll remember something about that person as you're telling the story. And I just think that is an amazing thing that you do.
Thank you. Shelley, you really hit on something very powerful there. One of the things that I saw in ministry, and if you are a minister, a member of the clergy, a chaplain, I want you just to listen for a moment. We learn in ministry how to do sermons. So often when it comes time for a funeral, the person who's been called, maybe it's your clergy, it's your minister, your pastor, and they know how to say something like, well, I didn't know Bob very well, which number one, never say that.
I know, but isn't it crazy? Or they say their name wrong?
Or yes, because they have not done their due diligence. They then want to read the obituary and then give you a sermon on the resurrection or on death or on comfort. And these things have become so cliched that it really turns people off.
It really does, because you leave there like, oh, I was just at church service. And I'm not being mean when I say that, but you don't want to leave there after your friend, your parent, your whatever has just died. You want to leave there with like a little bit of hope, and you want to leave there like with a little bit of something tugging at your heartstrings that was special with you and them.
One of the first things that I say when I get up at a funeral is your presence is a gift. And though your words may seem to fail you, just being here is enough. Because when we're sick and we need somebody by our bedside, we don't want somebody constantly talking to us. When we're grieving, no words are going to fix it, but somebody being there to hold a hand, a hand on a shoulder, a warm embrace communicates 10,000-fold what any words will do. Sometimes we just don't want to be alone, or we want to be alone with our thoughts, but not alone in presence.
Totally agree with that. I tell everybody I am the best hospital sitter ever because of all the things I went through between my parents and some other family members. I've learned you walk in there and you just sit. If they want to talk, you answer. If they need something, you do. But you just sit. And I have learned to sit, which is crazy for me, if you know me. But I've learned that I'm serving and honoring that person by doing that.
And that is the ministry of presence. It is incredibly powerful. And being able to help train people to be quiet, to just sit for a while. Sometimes we see somebody and we just see them in their solitude and their quietness, and we're there with them. Maybe if I talk to them, maybe if I can bring it out. Maybe they don't need that right now. If they need to talk, they'll let you know. But just having you there. So you think, well, we're not saying anything. The silence seems deafening. I'll go. Then you'll see them start to perk up. Well, you can stay a moment because they don't.
I need some ice chips. My feet aren't.
Because they don't want to be alone. Now, some people do. If you got to respect that. But the ministry of presence allows the ministry to be another human being in contact, whether physically, emotionally, spiritually with somebody, to say, you're not alone. And that's one of the powerful healing elements when it comes to loss and grief, is acknowledging that somebody's going through it. We want to diminish it. We say things like, well, they're in a better place. Okay, that may or may not be true, but it's not helpful at that moment.
Not at all. That's a stab right then. As soon as they say it, I want them away from me.
And sometimes the phrases that somebody uses may or may not be true, but it may not be what the person needs to hear at this moment. Well, they're not suffering. They're not in pain. You're right. They're not, but I'd still rather have them by my side. I'd still rather them be here a moment long. There's so much more that they could respond to that. So sometimes just being there, holding a hand, listening, being the support is more valuable and more helpful than trying to talk them into betterment. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, because like I said, I've been through all walks of it, and I can tell you people that I wanted to leave. Leave the place. And I can tell you somebody that I will never forget in my entire life. It was at my dad's funeral, and I was just besides myself. And she went and got a chair, Wiley, from the back of the church, dragged it all the way down the middle of the church, and sat it. I was on the end, and sat it on the end cap, and just put her arm around me.
And you remember it
17 years later, like it was yesterday, because she didn't say nothing. It was just the act of saying, "I'm right here. You need something."
And they had to make a special effort to do it. It wasn't just, the pew is full. I guess I'll stay back here. That standout moment will do more than 1,000 pamphlets, 1,000 sermons, because so much of it we already know. This is not about knowledge. It is about what's going on inside of us. And one of the first things that helps with grief recovery is acknowledging your grief.
That's a tough one, though, isn't it?
Well, how many times? And you're a tough cookie. It's often the words can come out, I'm okay. Are you?
Nope.
Well, no.
I had a phrase, and I'll say it over there. It sucks. That was my thing.
It does.
And I said I'm going to have a shirt that says that even, because I was tired of the cliches. I was tired of everybody expecting me to be, I don't know what they expected me to be. And I was raw, and this is where I was at. And I really wish sometimes people would be bold enough to have that shirt on or whatever, because you need to be real. You need to say, no, I'm not okay. No, it's not a good day. I'm going to make it. I mean, I never didn't think I wasn't going to make it through it. Never, ever, ever, ever did I think that. But at that moment, it was not good.
Well, even when Jesus was on the cross, they were hurling insults of, if you're the Son of God, come on down. It's so, and there's also that same mentality within the religious world of, Shelley, you come from one of the most religious and spiritual families. You're a faithful, godly woman. You're surrounded by ministers and clergy. Shouldn't grief be less painful for you?
I know. They said that one too. I just didn't get it. I don't know how people came up with these things.
Because somehow we're trying to equate that because we are people of God, that somehow it removes us from pain and suffering. Well, apparently they haven't read the book of Job. It is all about loss and pain and suffering. The book of Lamentations is all about lamenting. Just because you're a godly person does not mean that you do not go through grief. That's like saying, well, you know what? When you go to the dentist, you don't need Novocaine because you're a Christian. You don't feel pain. When you have surgery, you don't need anesthesia. You have God. Grief is a part of the human condition. It is a natural response, and it is the price of love. I've often said at services that I'm not here to dry your tears because that person has earned them. And the only thing worse than the tears is if you had such a relationship with them that there were no tears at all.
That's a good one. That is a good one. But
it is the cost of love. I know that. How long has it been since Mom and Dad have been gone?
17 years and 12 years.
And when does it feel like yesterday?
Every moment of every day. It really does. And the reason why it does, though, because I'm running their ministry. And so I get it thrown up every day.
So when are you supposed to get over it?
I hope I don't ever get over it.
Correct answer.
I did not know that was the correct answer. Ding, ding. I just want...
that is the correct answer.
I don't ever want to get over it because they were so important in my life.
Are.
Yes.
They are.
Right. And my children's life and my grandchildren's life. And even my grandchildren that never, ever knew them, I talk to them about my parents and the legacy and the things of my parents because I think that that's important. Just because they're gone, that doesn't mean my granddaughter shouldn't know that she acts just like my mother, and I love it. She does. She acts just like my mother. I'll call her Mini Erlene sometimes. And I tell her, you pray like Nanny, like my mom did. You do your little finger tapping like my mom. I said, it is so, you never ever met her. But you have those things in you. And those are the things I look for, When
I was doing my doctoral research, one of the folks that it led me to was one of the directors of psychology at the University of Louisville. And her and I had an extensive interview and conversation talking about grief and loss. And one of the things that she said that kind of took me back, mind you, she is truly an expert, was that we feel like we need to fix people. And we feel like we need to move them from where they are to where we think they should be, when the reality is often where they are is exactly where they should be. And sometimes that's right in the middle of their grief, sitting in sackcloth and ashes,
right there in the
mourning. Muck. Sometimes you need a good depression. Because because you can't go over grief, you can't go around grief, you can't go under grief, you have to go through it. And by cheating that, here's something interesting. For all of you out there who are possibly considering cosmetic surgery, just follow me for a second. One of the most popular procedures right now is liposuction. What does it do? It removes the external subcutaneous fat, and you can have the best figure in the world. but what's going on inside? Even though you may have the body of someone who looks very fit, the fat is still around the liver, the heart, the internal organs. You have corrected the outside to go, wow, I'm so healthy. Then you get your blood work back from the doctor, and you still have the insides of a heavier person because you cheated the health process. I have nothing against people doing whatever they need to do to look better and feel better about themselves, but be careful. You don't want to cheat the process. You and I can do all the things in the world to be distracted from our grief. You can see us on Instagram. We're looking great and happy. There's nothing in the world that will change how you feel about your parents.
I agree with that totally.
And we can make it look like, and we can even take you away from this ministry so that you don't have to see all the beautiful things they've created. But inside, you're still going to feel it. And when we try to help people through their grief, sometimes we want, can't you just laugh a little? Let's go to a movie. Let's have dinner. Look, they seem to be doing better. We have to allow people to acknowledge and accept their grief. And sometimes that means sitting in it for a while.
Well, recently something life-changing in my life happened, and I dialed my mom's phone number.
Did you really?
Yep. Now it's been disconnected.
Automatic reaction.
Yeah, because I would always share with my mom, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. And so it was something that was going on, and I just reached up for that phone and I hit it, and I was like, it was disconnected, of course. And I was like, oh. But for that brief moment, I was excited that I was going to get to share it with her. So I just said it out loud. What was going on.
I probably, I lost my mom
Yeah.
about a year and a half ago. And I still, every once in a while, walking through the house, I'm so used to every single day of my life since I can begin speaking, saying, I love you, Mom. I still have a need to say it. Sometimes it makes me feel good, and sometimes it makes me feel sad. But when I feel sad, I may just want to sit down on the sofa and cry for a minute. I don't want to avoid my grief. I don't want to deny it because Mom was too important for me to just relegate her to the past. Even after 17 years, it tells you where your heart is. I need to talk to Mom. I need to talk to Dad. These are good things. The only thing worse would be they're gone and I never thought about them again.
Yeah.
That's not you at all. So in some of the areas to help with grief recovery, first is to acknowledge your grief, to know that it's there, to recognize the different signs of grief. It may be a change in eating. It may be a change in sleeping. Some people have lost their spouse, and it's like, well, it's been 5 years. I should be over it by now. Says who?
Right.
Says who? If you've been married to somebody 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you're not going to get over it in a year, and you're not supposed to get over it. It's a matter of finding the new normal and adjusting to the new world, not for it to go back to a reset to the way it was. It can't be.
Right.
It can't be. So acknowledging your grief, allowing yourself to grieve, giving yourself permission. This may sound very old school. When my mom passed, somebody bought a wreath for us, a beautiful spring wreath for just the memorial. And they said, "Can you take it home? Would you take?" Of course, I'm going to take it home. It's too beautiful. It was made of silk flowers. And in fact, Tim, who is a friend who had a florist shop, created this beautiful thing. And I left it at the front door on its stand for 1 full year. From the moment it arrived to 1 year, and I said, I want to see that every time I walk in the house, every time I leave, and for anybody that drives by, that this house is in mourning.
That's a good one. I like that.
People used to hang black wreaths on the door.
Right.
People would wear a certain color, black, for a period of time to say, I'm in mourning.
Right.
It gave us permission. Now we're supposed to dress up for the funeral, then go back to the way we were 3 days later. And then it makes people forget that we're suffering. I want people to realize we're in a time of mourning. That doesn't mean we don't laugh or go to a movie. And even now, it doesn't mean that I'm done mourning. I will mourn the loss of my parents, people that I've lost in my world for the rest. I'm supposed to. But it's how it affects you and how you function. See, I acknowledge my grief. I allow myself to grieve. And then it's seeking support. And that can be a minister, a pastor, a counselor, a therapist, group therapy. One of the things I love about you is with the people you're close to, you will share.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think I'm a part of a circle
You are.
that I get an unfiltered, Shelley.
Yeah, well, you were here the day that I got the call that my brother-in-law died. We were
So-
upstairs, sitting upstairs,
Yep.
and I got the call that he died. And he was ill and it was an ugly illness. 2 years we were waiting for the phone call for 2 years. But me and you were sitting upstairs, and I'll never forget that. And I got the phone call.
You just hit on a very powerful point. I know that you have a large family, and maintaining privacy. I know that you had somebody in your world very close to that you love that ended up being ill. And with all the best doctors and medicine the world can offer, they could not pinpoint a diagnosis, nor whether there would be a prognosis or recovery.
Right.
And I know for a decade, you grieved. They didn't die.
Nope.
And they still, by the grace of God, have not died. This is called anticipatory grief. Talk to anybody out there that's had somebody in hospice, because part of my world is working in hospice, working in the funeral world, working in the hospital world, is even with your own health. If somebody came to you right now and said, you have blah, 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 what does that mean? How is it going to change me? It starts a grieving process for your health, for your well-being, and then the worry of what the future will hold. You did that for a decade with somebody in your world. You were on the most high alert. Nobody died. Oh, Shelley, you need to be so thankful. The Lord has allowed them to stay around a while. Thankful. You were on constant alert for somebody you cared about. And people could not grasp that anticipatory grief is as powerful, as deep, as dark, and as draining as if you had gone to the funeral.
And, it was a learning experience. I'm thankful, actually, that I did get to go through that because it has made me a person that cares a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? A little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more thinking about that thing 1 inch below my nose before I open it.
And it not only changed that part of your world, your vocabulary. When I went through a health crisis many years ago, in fact, it's been 23 years, I dealt with chronic pain from nerve damage that I had behind my ear that caused intense pain inside my mouth. And at the time, the type of pain was so non-understood that somebody would write it off. It's all in his head. It's all make-believe. It wasn't until Mayo Clinic figured out what was going on. But one of the things I promised myself after a year and a half, almost 2 years of suffering, was that anytime somebody was in pain, I don't care what time of day or night, I'll take your call. I want to be there for you. I don't ever want you to feel alone. That's how it changed you. When somebody comes in and starts talking about their grief, you're not going to give the platitudes. You're not going to give the religious jargon. You're not going to just, oh, my goodness, you've got something going on in your life. Let me whip out my Bible, give you a scripture, and I'm going to go about my day. Here's a bumper sticker for your car. It doesn't work. Because sometimes the power of God is not a clever phrase. Sometimes it is sitting by the city gate in sackcloth and ashes with somebody. Well, aren't you going to tell them about the love of Jesus? Shh. Be quiet. Just sit for a while. Like you said, draw up a chair. Sit with me for a moment and weep. More is accomplished in that moment because that is a part of us. It's just like celebrating.
Well, I have a pastor that's ill right now. And
God bless him.
Yes. And when I know he's going for treatment or for a lot of tests or whatever, I send him lunch. I send him money and say, lunch is on me today.
And part of that is self-care.
And it's funny, and God really tells me every time, because I might not know his schedule or whatever, and every single time I get this nudge from God to do this, I'll find out, oh, he's on his way to Mayo or whatever. And God says, do lunch, because it's funny. But my dad used to always do that. And I never realized that until recently, that was something my father did. And I was just doing it because you forget to eat. You might not have the extra money because hospitals are expensive and different things. So I was doing it out of kind. And then I realized I was carrying on a legacy of being thoughtful.
That sometimes people seek support and sometimes it arrives by the hands of others. You were the answer to a prayer that you didn't even know that person prayed. Sometimes, because Scripture says we don't know what to pray, and the Spirit intercedes for us, and you became the answer to that prayer. Sometimes people need to rest. So maybe it's whether it's watching the kids, watching the dogs, whatever it may be, you allow them to go take a nap, particularly if somebody's on vigil. In the hospice world, having respite care, you may be at bedside death vigil, and you're like, I can't leave. If you were to be who you need to be, you need to step away, even if it's just to the other room to nap, to eat. You providing the need, and not just doing what everybody else does. Everybody, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Well, anticipate. Bring the help to them. That hot dish that you put in the refrigerator, they may or may not eat it, but they're going to remember you were there. And when they do need food, it's there. Whether it's coming over and cleaning the house, doing the laundry, mowing the lawn, picking up their kid from soccer practice so that they can stay bedside. Or maybe they don't want to leave the house yet. We're so apt to want to fix people from their grief when we're pulling them out of going through it. The idea, I hate to say it. One of the catchphrases that people say all the time, Shelley, it's going to be okay.
Yep.
Here's the deal, people. Sometimes it's not okay. When you look at almost every person in Scripture, even the most strongest people of God, Jesus had 12 disciples. 11 of them had horrible endings. You have people filleted and crucified upside down. You've got some terrible things that happened. Moses is going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and he won't get to go into the Holy Land. Sometimes it does not end well. And one of the things that I do when people are going through tough times is I don't tell them it's going to be okay. I tell them I'm here for you, no matter what happens. Because sometimes the diagnosis, a person of God can still get the diagnosis and it end horribly. We don't want to hear the pie in the sky. We want to hear, I won't be alone. Shelley, no matter what you go through, what the future holds for you, I don't know. But I know you're not going to be alone. And sometimes that's all that matters is you're not going to face whatever the world throws at you, whatever Satan throws at you, whatever life and creation throws at you in this fallen and broken world. You won't be alone. That is powerful.
And you need to tell that person, I think, I sleep with my phone. You can text me anytime or you can call me. You know what I'm saying? If they just know there's an outlet for somebody to reach out to, they might never ever text you or call you. But knowing that if I needed to text you or call you
100%
is such a huge difference. And don't say it if you don't mean it, okay? Because that will be even worse.
Yep.
And I'm sorry I said that out loud, but I've been there, done that one too. But that alone gives you that like, wow, somebody cares. I'm not going to be alone. I know I can text that person. I know I can call that person. That's huge. Huge.
And we don't realize that those simple acts of kindness change somebody's perspective. It helps them through. It won't fix their grief, but you're taking a hand and walking through it with them. And part of it, you're saying so many of the right things. You've got to take care of yourself. When you're grieving, case in point, Shelley, I want you to imagine a spouse who's been taking care of a sick spouse and they've had a terminal diagnosis. They've done everything. They take care of everything. In my world, having done 900 funerals, that is so many funeral stories, that spouse who gets the diagnosis that their spouse is passing starts their grief the moment they get the diagnosis. Well, no, you need to value the time. You have a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 months, 6 days, whatever it is.
And you know what? God knows the day you came in and God knows the day you left. So when they tell you you have a year, there's no thing is 365 days later. And people almost only hear that part and don't hear the other part. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I do understand that sometimes doctors are taking best guesses.
Right.
And I also don't believe that God is snatching people out of this world. You know, the Lord took him. The Lord needed another angel in heaven. No, he didn't. God does not need a thing from you, and he did not take your loved one. He's there to receive them. But that's Greek mythology. God's up there looking down at the arena, pushing buttons, pulling levers, and snatching people out of this world.
I just really think they're just trying to say they are really trying to be kind, but they just need to shut up.
Be still, the scripture says. Be still. You don't have to say anything or do anything, but sometimes we neglect taking care of ourselves. And Shelley, sometimes when somebody is very sick and that person passes, there is guilt on the part of the caregiver because there is relief, there is peace. And it's like, I feel so bad that my husband, my mother, my father, my cousin, whatever passed, and I feel what? The ability to rest? The ability to sit back and have a meal?
Well, you totally feel like that after you lose somebody. You feel
Sure.
like if you go eat or you go lay down.
I'm not allowed to enjoy life.
Or if you stop, you totally feel like you're dishonoring what just happened. But I don't think you're dishonoring what happened. I think you're starting the healing process.
Well, you are, and I want to suggest to you that you are midway through the healing process. If your grief started the moment that person was diagnosed, and you've gone through that for 6 months or a year of being caregiver, taking care of them, your grief started them. The moment they pass, you've passed a milestone in your recovery. Now, there's still other grief to go.
That's a good way.
But if somebody has suffered,
right, because
then you're allowed to have peace. You're allowed to not have to worry about them. There is somebody that I worked with some time ago that a younger person in their 20s passed. But because that person had struggled with addiction and had actually coded several times, they had died several times, been brought back, that when they passed, one of the things the parents said was, we're at peace because
they
they're
weren't
not
in that
suffering.
flight zone at all times.
Because, and it's not the parents talking about it, it's saying that their young person, even though they're gone, they felt a sense of peace because their struggle. Now, I don't wish that on anybody, but their ability to put a flag right there in that spot to go, we have struggled with them for 10 years. They're at peace. Doesn't make it better, but it's just one more flag in the ground that says we're moving forward. Because you can't drive a car from a rearview mirror. I mean, you'll wreck. But some people live their lives of, I'm only going to look at what's behind me. I'm only going to look at what once was. Instead of acknowledging their grief, allowing themselves the grief, seeking help and support, and then to take care of yourself. If you don't eat and sleep, what happens?
Well, you can't function. I mean,
And you've done it. I've watched you become, the 24-hour round the clock because you're a consummate caregiver. But what would happen? It's the Superman syndrome. If Superman stops to eat or sleep, somebody dies.
It's just in your mind, you have this, I don't know what to call it, but there's a place in your mind that says you don't want to miss it.
That's right.
And I actually missed my mom dying. I am going to admit this right now. Bonnie and I were taking care of my mom. My mom was diagnosed, and she didn't want to go to hospice center. And so she said, can I come home and die to her house? And if that we were going to do, whatever my mom wanted. Hospice was there in and out, but Yvonne moved in, and I was there also whenever I could be there. So it was getting to the end. My dad, yes, he was dead, but he, as an angel, came. We had the whole
You felt
experience.
his presence
yes,
there.
Yes, we did. My mom even mentioned the name Jesus and Gordy, and she would lift her arm, and she was very close to dying. And so she was having those moments. And I needed to go home and get some fresh clothes and just get away for a minute. And so I asked the hospice lady, I said, is she going to be okay for like an hour? Because I need to go, and I'll be back in like an hour. I remember this so vividly. And yeah, her breathing's not doing this, and blah, 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 blah. You'll be fine. I left, got home, got in the shower, got out of the shower, was getting ready, and I get the call. My mom died.
Does this surprise you?
No. And the reason why it does not is because my mom knows that would have taken me over the edge.
100%.
Totally. So she was actually, I believe,
She waited for you to leave.
Yep, that's it. And I can honestly say
ask
that
any
now.
hospice worker, ask anybody that has been in death care, afterlife care, that not too long, I know this, 35 years of doing this, Shelley. I was with a close family friend. Their grandmother was very ill. We drove out into the boonies to where she was in hospice, passing it home. When we got there, what do you suppose happened to all the vitals? They went up. Even though this person was non-responsive, the voice, the stimulation, the touch, we spent quite a bit of time. I asked the hospice nurse privately, I said, I need your assessment. She goes, she's holding her own. There's not a concept of time at the moment, which means that hospice worker did not have any of the telltale signs that we're not going to go into here on the radio of what might be coming. We got in the car, and we probably got 10 or 15 minutes away, and I just stopped the car at the nearest gas station. And the two folks with me said, what are you doing? I said, we got to go back. They're like, what, did you get a call? No, we got to go back. I said, I just remembered. That person has constantly been surrounded by family. We've just introduced the first moment where the only person there is a hospice person because the other family had left to give this person privacy. We rushed back, and they literally only had 1 minute left before. In other words, it was the first moment they were alone and could pass quietly. And often at moments like that, when somebody's lucid, like your mom, they will see, they'll talk about their angels here to come get me. Loved ones have arrived. When my mother was close to passing, some of the last things she talked about was her mother being there. And we knew.
Well, see, you're a trained professional, so you knew that. And I'm very thankful for the hospice person that told me that my mom is going to be in and out of heaven. And I thought, what do you mean in and out? She goes, she doesn't want to leave you guys, but she knows where she's going.
Sure.
So she's going to have moments, and she would see the lace veil. She saw something that she said looked like a tunnel, like a laundry chute, which I know what that was also. And then she went to the banquet table and described it perfectly. And I was with her, in her words. And then when my dad came and she kept lifting her arm up and saying, Gordy and Jesus. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, that is what was going on. I do.
We're tripartite beings, body, mind, and spirit. And when we talk about the spiritual realm, often it's easy for people to want to dismiss it. It's religious mumbo-jumbo. Where do you get that? When you're around long enough, you begin to understand the body pretty well. And we do a lot of research. We try to take care of it. We try to do the things to make it last a while longer. Often we understand the psychological. You know what? You need rest. You need counseling. You may need this, this, and this. With the spiritual realm, often we just want to dismiss it. But I believe there is a God. And if there is a God, then there's a spiritual realm. And that means that there are spiritual beings. And I believe that.
I do too.
And what are angels? Angels are messengers.
There's angels among us right now. We don't even know it.
Scripture says that sometimes we've been entertaining angels unaware. And I think for your mom, being able to get a glimpse into where she was going, that world that is to come, has to be a part of the gift of comfort to know that she's well today. And the fact that you still love her, miss her, acknowledge her. Both her and your dad were remarkable people that built a legacy that you continue on. How could you not miss them? And it's okay. That's a type of grief and loss that is healthy. But when people get complicated grief, where they can't get past it, they don't move it, it begins to drag them and pull them down. That's where you have to go back to acknowledging and accepting that I'm still in grief. It's been 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. When I did a grief recovery workshop, I had people show up that were like, my spouse died 2 weeks ago. Everybody's rallying. I still take just as seriously that spouse that walks in that says it's been 23 years.
I was at a service one time with you, and we were doing a candlelight service.
Yes.
We were lighting a candle for our person that had died, and you actually asked me when I got up there how long it had been. And I almost, for a moment, was embarrassed to say it. No, I'm just saying where I felt like at that moment. And when I said it out loud, I again felt the healing.
Absolutely.
Because every time you do acknowledge or you do whatever, it is a healing. I really believe that in my heart. It's another part of the process.
If you've just joined us here at WAPM, we're taking a few moments to talk about grief recovery. And before we close out, I just want to review for some of the folks that maybe have just tuned in. I think we've only got just a couple of minutes left. In grief recovery, there's 5 things that can really help you. One is to acknowledge and accept that you're going through a time of grief.
Yep.
The other is to allow yourself to grieve, regardless of whatever that time is. You're not sick. You're not broken. Grief is a part of the human condition. It's ingrained with us. It's a gift from God. And the only thing worse than grief is to have never loved so deeply that you had no grief at all.
That.
To seek support, whether it is spiritual, physical, mental, emotional support, and to not go through it alone. Also, taking care of yourself. That is self-care. It's making sure that you eat, you sleep, you do the things that you should do to keep yourself as tuned in as possible. Yes, it may be difficult, but if you don't care for yourself, then other people are going to be grieving about you because they're going to be losing you little by little. And finally, adjusting to that new normal, acknowledging that it won't be the same. There are things in your world that are different now, Shelley, even though you've got people in your world that aren't standing by your side physically, that spiritually and emotionally they're still there, and you've adjusted. You've carried on the legacy of this station. You've taken care of your family and had some of the most beautiful moments when I think about the people in your world, because you've adjusted. It doesn't mean you don't grieve or that you're not sad, but it means you've found your new normal.
And you know what? I am thankful for every bit of the journey. I really am. I can honestly sit here and say, I'm glad that I had all the different steps. And I'm still having all the different steps. But I'm very thankful that I was able to do the steps. And so that's really important to me, is that people understand. And they don't go in order. Did you know that, Wiley?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that you and I, on a future occasion, get to talk about is I've been working on putting together a grief recovery workshop that will be at no cost to the community, that will be a spiritually based, psychologically sound.
Do we have a date?
Not yet.
Okay, so he's coming back.
I am.
He's coming back, and when you have it figured out, you're going to come back and tell us.
Yeah, we've put together some things and actually done a few workshops, but we want to make sure that the polish is on there so that people are getting the best quality help and assistance that they can. And I look forward to sharing that at a future date with you.
Well, I loved it that the Lowen, I can't pronounce it right now, did that at the funeral home.
Absolutely. Loman's, there's several different places that have done candlelight services, nights of remembrance, that allow people, because you think, I don't want to do a lights of memory at Christmas. At the time of the holidays, all the first, even if it's second, third, or fourth. For you, it's 17 years.
Yeah.
Maybe the 17th Christmas. But being able to acknowledge them, it means allowing yourself to grieve.
I was thankful I went that night. So
I'm thankful you were too.
I hope that you'll come back.
Anytime.
How could people get a hold of you?
You can certainly find me on social media. If they do call here, you can direct them to me. If there's a way I can serve you or your family or the community, that's what I do.
And he means that. He doesn't just say that because, like I said, we've been in each other's lives a long time, and you've been there for a lot of moments in my life, and I think I've showed up for a couple of yours.
You know, it would be interesting to be able to have maybe a series. You don't have to do it all the time, but even a call-in program where people can call.
I have been waiting for him to do this. Okay.
You say when?
You always are so busy.
Well, I'm finishing school. The doctoral program I finished in December. And
so we're going to kick off the new year doing that.
I would love it.
All right.
Thank you for letting me be a part of things.
Tell him your social media name.
Wiley Lowe. You can find me on Instagram at watch_Wiley. You can find me on Facebook under Wiley Lowe. There is a variety of parts of my world, whether it's my television world, whether it's my ministerial world. I am always delighted to be a part of the community and help out in some way. So say hello when you get a chance.
Thanks so much for being here. God bless you.
My pleasure.